I read an interview today in Boxing News. Actually, it was on Boxing News Online, the magazine, suggesting that Carl Froch doesn't appear to be attending to give George Groves a rematch. Promoter Eddie Hearn, who promotes Carl Froch, aware that he signed a free fight promotional deal with George Groves that's now come to a close. So I think, as it stands, Groves isn't a matchroom fighter, but I think Eddie Hearn's already said that he thinks it's the best move for both fighters to have a rematch. Probably, the fact that they've just had a fight in late November, probably looking at May, June, that sort of time, possibly an open air stadium fight. There's even been talk about Wembley Arena, which I believe houses, can take 70,000 fans. In many ways, it seemed like the obvious thing to do after the fight. I guess, put simply, Carl Froch is 36. He's not getting any younger. There aren't many years left for him to fight too many more young lions like George Groves. So you'd think he'd want to move and get the fight in as quickly as possible. You'd guess with the momentum and public demand that this fight currently has after the outcry that's been caused over the stoppage, now would be as big a time as possible to to get tickets on sale and to get this in the diary. Realistically, they sold out. Their last arena, I think they said they sold it out in 11 minutes for 20,000 seats. This fight is going to be much bigger than the last fight, given what's gone on first time round. With a bigger venue in London, I could see them selling 40,000, 50,000 tickets. I think if you think 30,000 went to Chisora at Upton Park, I was there that day. I think this fight is now probably going to be bigger than that fight in terms of public demand, and obviously as a result of that, the purses for both fighters are going to be bigger. George Groves clearly wants a rematch. There's other fights out there for Groves now. He could fight for other versions of the world title. You'd have to have him beating Stieglitz. You'd have to have him beating Beaker. But for him, a fight against Carl Froch, the money it brings is probably where is probably really where the real glory is, rather than taking one of the other versions off, Beaker or Stieglitz. It really seems to be the most sensible fight for both guys. What Carl Froch suggests in his interview is he's got various goals that he's set out to achieve. He wants to beat everyone, on his record. For example, Mikhail Kessler, he avenged that defeat. He's now set his sights on Andre Ward, and his target is to go about and beat Andre Ward. He said he wants to bring that fight to the UK. I see that as highly unrealistic. I know Carl Froch is probably a bigger fan fighter and maybe even brings more money to the table than Andre Ward. But I just don't see Andre Ward coming to the UK. I think there's big fights for him out in the States. He's an American Olympic gold medalist, pound for pound number 2. He is probably undisputed number 1 in the division. I don't see him coming over here and fighting an away fight. I think the way Ward fights, he doesn't rely on knockouts. He's a 12-round points fighter these days, and does he want to risk, a sort of hometown decision on points? Most likely not, no. So I think that's unrealistic. I think Froch probably could go out to the States and fight Ward. Realistically, Froch is a big name. Ward isn't a fashionable fighter. Froch brings 2 versions of the world title. There's probably a lot of interest from Ward in taking that fight, but not in the UK. Ward's a funny one, really, because, as I say, Olympic gold medalist, never lost, never even really looked like losing. Pound for pound number 2, pretty much beating everyone there is out there. But the public really haven't bought into him, and I think the way the public have bought into George Groves, there's probably more demand for that fight, than the Ward fight. I also think it's a more winnable fight than Froch. So, to be honest, I just view Ward on a different level to Froch in terms of skill. I think Froch has proven, he can win over Groves. I know there's a lot of debate over it, but you'd have to say Froch Groves 2 is a 50-50 fight, whereas Froch Ward, you'd have to say the odds are more heavily stacked in Ward's favour, certainly. But the interesting thing is that Froch has suggested he doesn't want to be forced into giving the rematch. He doesn't feel he has to. He said that George Groves' chance slipped away. He could have beaten him there and then, but he didn't. And he feels that he defeated George Groves. He thinks the stoppage was very sound, and in many ways he feels like he's the victim here. He thinks he would have crushed George Groves had the fight gone on, and the early stoppage, whilst in his opinion a good stoppage, has taken away the glory of what should be a brilliant come from behind knockout that he achieved against a young lion. So I can see both sides of the point of view. I think George Grove fight makes sense based on the fact that Froch isn't getting any younger. The money's there. Public demand is so high for this fight right now. I know Groves could probably win a verse in the world title and bring that to the table, but the momentum this fight has got behind it, and the time of year, they can have 6 months off and then fight May, June in a massive stadium. I think it's got to be done. I don't see Ward coming over to the UK. The only other massive money fight for Froch is the Kessler free fight, the rubber mats if you like. Obviously one fight either way. I think the difficulty is Kessler's certainly showing signs of slipping, I think, and whilst there would be public interest in seeing that fight, whilst it would be a very entertaining fight, I can't imagine too many people out there who'd be picking Kessler to win that fight. I don't see that as a competitive fight. I think Froch is a very strong favourite in that fight. Froch versus Groves is a very 50-50 fight. Froch versus Ward, I view Ward as winning that in my estimation. I think Froch versus Groves is a real tight fight. Obviously, Froch won the first fight. Groves seemed to be more technically skilled, probably more talented. Froch seemed to come on strong towards the end of the fight. And incidentally, that's another point that was raised in this Boxing News article, is Froch said he doesn't view Groves as a 12-round fighter. He views him as a big puncher who can knock people out. He views him as a very technically skilled fighter, but he doesn't view him as a 12-round fighter. And I've got to say, whilst Groves did win 12 rounds against the Gale, he did somehow, he was dominating that fight, and then his game plan slipped away. He got sucked into a war. He didn't box on the back foot. He went very, very front forward heavy, if you like. There was some signs of fatigue. There was signs of Froch wearing him down and starting to take the fight by the grip of the neck. In my earlier post-fight analysis video, I did say I think the stoppage was very early, but despite that, I think Froch would have got to him anyway, whether it had been points or whether it would have been KO. It's a tough call, but I guess this is a very long-winded way of making a few points, but the main one being that Froch has today suggested that his aim is to go after Ward rather than Groves. How realistic that is, I don't know. It'd be very interesting to see, how that develops, which direction he takes. I guess there are two questions that I'd be interested in hearing people's thoughts on. The first is, what road should Carl Froch take? The second is, what road do you think he will take? It may be that... Do you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if we see a Kessler free fight. Maybe a Grove... I see Froch Kessler, Froch beating Kessler. Maybe Groves the Gale, or maybe Groves versus Beaker, Groves versus Stieglitz, and then the two of them meeting again next year. I don't think Froch wants to delay it too much longer though. He's 36 now. Arguably, age was a factor in the fight last week. If he's coming into the ring against Groves 37, 38, it's arguably going to be even more of a factor. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. Thanks very much for watching. Please leave your comments in the section below. And as always, subscribe. In terms of videos that I've got coming out soon, I want to have a look at the Frank Warren card on the 30th. I'm going to go to that, so I'm very much looking forward to that. You've got Derek Chisora versus Andre Parla. You've got Nathan Cleverly moving up to cruiserweight. You've also got the likes of Mitchell Smith, Bilioni, some really interesting prospects on the undercard. So I got that one to do as well. So please keep your eyes on the channel. Thanks very much for watching, and as I say, leave your comments below.